Hello everyone, I am Katie Contos with the Clean Energy Solutions Center and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by the Solutions Center in partnership with the United Nations Foundation's Energy Access Practitioner Network. Today's webinar is focused on tools and resources for scaling up mini or microgrids in Tanzania. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar features. For audio, you have two options. You may either listen through your computer or over the telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. Doing so will eliminate the possibility of feedback and echo. If you choose to dial in by phone, please select the telephone option, and a box on the right side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. If anyone is having any technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinars help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. If you would like to ask a question, we ask that you use the questions pane where you may type in your question. If you're having difficulty viewing the materials through the webinar portal, you will find the PDF copies at the presentations at cleanenergysolutions.org/training, and you may follow along as our speakers present. Also, the audio recording and presentations will be posted to the Solutions Center training page within a few days of the broadcast and will be added to the Solutions Center YouTube channel, where you'll find other informative webinars, as well as video interviews with thought leaders on clean energy policy topics. Finally, one important note of mention before we begin our presentation is the Clean Energy Solutions Center does not endorse or recommend specific products or services. Information provided in this webinar is featured in the Solutions Center resource as one of many best practice resources reviewed and selected by technical experts. Today's webinar agenda is centered around the presentations from our guest panelists, Andrew Mizana, Sanjoy Sanyal, and Alexander Ox, who have joined us to highlight new tools and resources available to mini-grid developers in Tanzania. Before we jump into the presentations, I'll provide a quick overview of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, and Yasmin Irboy-Ruff from the United Nations Foundation will provide a quick overview of the Energy Access Practitioners Network. Then following the panelists' presentations, we'll have a question and answer session where the panelists will address questions submitted by the audience. At the end of the webinar, you'll be automatically prompted to fill out a brief survey as well. So thank you in advance for taking a moment to respond. This webinar is provided by the Clean Energy Solutions Center, which focuses on helping the government policymakers design and adopt policies and programs that support the development of clean energy technologies. This is accomplished through the support in crafting and implementing policies related to energy access, no-cost expert policy assistant, and peer-to-peer learning and training tools, such as this webinar. The Clean Energy Solutions Center is co-sponsored by the governments of Australia, Sweden, and the United States with in-kind support from the government of Mexico. The Solutions Center provides several clean energy policies, programs, and services, including a team of over 60 global experts that can provide remote and in-person technical assistance to governments and government-supported institutions, no-cost virtual webinar training on a variety of clean energy topics, partnership building with development agencies and regional and global organizations to deliver support, and an online library containing over 5,000 clean energy policy-related publications, tools, and videos, and other resources. Our primary audience is made up of energy policymakers and analysts from governments and technical organizations in all countries, but we also strive to engage with private sectors, NGOs, and civil society. The Solutions Center is an international initiative that works with more than 35 international partners across its suite of different programs. Several of the partners are listed above and include organizations like IRENA and the IEA, and programs like SE for All, and regional focused entities such as EcoWatts, Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. A marquee feature of the Solutions Center provides is a no-cost expert policy assistance known as AskanExpert. The AskanExpert service matches policymakers with more than 60 global experts selected as authoritative leaders on specific energy, finance, and policy topics. For example, in the area of mini-grid standards, we are very pleased to have Ian Baring-Gould, Wind Technology Deployment Manager, serving as one of our experts. If you have a need for policy assistance in mini-grid standards or any other clean energy sector, we encourage you to use this valuable service. Again, This assistance is provided free of charge. If you have a question for our experts, please submit it through our simple online form at cleanenergysolutions.org/expert. We also invite you to spread the word about this service to those in your networks and organizations. Today's webinar is co-moderated by Yasmin Irboy-Ruff, who is a senior officer at the United Nations Foundation Energy and Climate Team, primarily assisting in coordinating efforts to scale up energy access in developing countries. Now I'd like to provide a brief introduction for today's panelists. First up today is Andrew Manzava, who is an operations officer with the IFC base in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Andrew is the program manager for Lighting Tanzania and the Tanzania MiniGrid program under IFC. Following Andrew, we will hear from Sanjoy Sanyal, who is a senior associate in clean energy finance at World Resources Institute. Prior to WRI, Sanjoy managed the New Ventures program that helped environmental enterprises raise capital from impact investors. And our final speaker today is Alexander Ochs, who is the CEO of Berlin-based SD Strategies and Senior Director of Climate and Energy at World Watch Institute in Washington, D.C. Alexander currently also acts as the president of the Forum for Atlantic Climate and Energy Talks and is a senior fellow at Johns Hopkins University. And with those introductions, I'd like to welcome Yasmin to the webinar. Yasmin?
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. Hello again, everyone. My name is Yasmin, and it is a pleasure to have you on another Practitioner Network webinar. This one will be a little different than what we normally do for our monthly training webinars, for which we're very excited. We'll be showcasing two very interesting tools for you that should be of great use to those of you who are interested in or currently developing mini or microgrids in Tanzania, one of which is still not publicly available. So this will be hopefully the first time that it's being shared on such a platform, that we hope that it will be of great use going forward to everybody. And we're really thankful to our colleagues from IFC, WRI, and SD Strategies for being with us today. I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody who's joining us for this webinar about the importance of energy access. I'm going to quickly skip through to give a little bit of a background about our Energy Access Practitioner Network, which was established by the United Nations Foundation in 2011 to help scale energy access in developing countries. We currently have the largest membership of its kind that spans small and medium enterprises, academia, NGOs, civil society, social enterprises, governments, all looking to deliver modern energy services, especially for rural electrification. You can see how our membership has grown in the past years, as well as all the different technologies that our members work with. And in this particular webinar, obviously, we'll be highlighting a couple of tools of interest to MiniGrids developers in Tanzania. Our members will remember that we actually held a workshop in Tanzania very recently that looked at specifically distributors of distributed energy access solutions, so small solar lanterns, solar home systems, things like that. So this is sort of looking at the other side of the coin, looking at the larger systems, again, in the Tanzanian context, in which we have 225 Practitioner Network members working. So hopefully this will be of good use to quite a number of you. And once again, this webinar will be the fifth in our country-focused webinar series, where we look at the state of energy access across the globe. And this webinar is also a contribution to the Clean Energy MiniGrids Partnership, of which the United Nations Foundation is a steering committee member and co-secretariat. So please feel free to follow live tweets via @EnergyAccessPN as well as @MiniGridsHIO. And please join the conversation using the hashtag PNWebinar. So very quickly, before our panelists start talking about their specific tools, I just wanted to touch on the fact that Tanzania is considered a large gap country by Sustainable Energy for All, which is among the 20 countries with the lowest electrification rates. And here we can see how that electrification rate plays in between the rural and urban population, with about 4% of the rural population currently being considered to have energy access. That being said, Tanzania is actually one of the countries that has a really good score on RISE, the Regulatory Indicators for Sustainable Energy by the World Bank. And you will see that it has an overall score of 75 for energy access out of 100, which is really great in terms of the existence of an electrification plan, consumer affordability of electricity, especially the framework for mini-grids, all have really high scores. So obviously Tanzania is doing something right, and we will be delving a bit more into that through the specific tools that we'll be discussing. So with that, here's how you can reach out to us if you're not a member already. And I will turn it over to Andrew to talk about IFC's MiniGrids portal. Thank you very much.
Andrew, oh, it looks like you unmuted your mic. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Yasmin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. I'm going to present to you very briefly about the Tanzania MiniGrid program.
Andrew, I'm really sorry to interrupt. You're on presenter mode in your screen right now. Can you put it on presentation mode?
You can see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Nope. Oh, now we can. So if you're on two monitors, you'll need to select the other monitor.
Can you see now?
We can see your screen. It's still in presenter mode.
Andrew, if you could please go to the so the sharing app on your screen where the pause button is, if you could please go to that and select monitor 2. There should be a drop down.
Okay.
So we're currently seeing things in presenter view. Are you using two monitors?
No, I'm using only one monitor.
Okay, so you're it seems you're presenting in presentation view instead of full screen. Are you able to present in just full screen?
It's on full screen.
That's it. That's perfect right there.
Okay, thank you. Now you can see it properly.
Yes, it looks wonderful. Thank you.
And apologies for that. So briefly, I'm going to present about the MiniGrids program in Tanzania. Very briefly, for those who are not much aware about IFC, IFC is part of the World Bank Group, and IFC main purpose is to promote and support private sector and to help generate productive jobs and deliver essential services. Basically, is to catalyze and mobilize other sources of financing for private sector development. Why mini-grids in Tanzania? Basically, Tanzania, compared to other countries, is facing a very big challenge in terms of financial limitation to extend the grid. And there are several parts of the country with very large population which have no access to electricity, and the government and the other players, including development partners, for the past several years have tried to support mini-grid penetration in the country and the off-grid sector in general. And as the result, the country under the Ministry of Energy and Agency, under the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, under EWURA, the regulator, they've developed unique legal and regulatory environment which support the development of mini-grids in the country. So the question is, how do we keep on supporting and help companies and private sector to effectively capture the mini-grid opportunity in the country? So that's where IFC comes in with the working under the Tanzania MiniGrid program, with the main objective to develop distributed power generation sector in the country, specifically the MiniGrid, in partnership with scaling up renewable energy program in Tanzania. So allow me to spend just a few minutes on this current slide, just to share with you the key components of the MiniGrid program in Tanzania. The MiniGrid program has got two major components. One, we call it a market development, which is all about steering up the market, making the conducive environment for investors and MiniGrid developers to be able to invest in the country. And one of the sub-components of this main component is the development of technical standard and specifications. These were key and part of the plays a very important part on the development of MiniGrids in Tanzania, because for MiniGrid developers in the country, if you want to build your MiniGrid in the rural and remote areas, and you expect in the future the main grid to arrive in your place where you invest your MiniGrid, the only way is to build according to the existing grid code, which is the main grid, which is extremely expensive for you to realize your return on investment during the time that you are off grid, since originally you did not plan for main grid connection. So on the other side, there are several MiniGrid, microgrid developers who have been just building these MiniGrids or microgrid project without any specific kind of standards, and put them at risk at the same time when the main grid shows up. So the idea was to develop a minimum kind of technical standard and specifications, which will give room in terms of small upgrade when the grid arrives. So at the same time, you may be able to connect to the main grid. So we work very closely with the government working group, which comprises of WURA, the regulator, Rural Energy Agency, the Ministry, National Environment Management Council, together with Rural Energy Agency and Tanzania Bureau of Standards to develop these standards. And now they are on the final stages to be adopted at the national standards. And the good news, recently they've been referenced by WURA new rules, which will be published soon. They called SPP electricity rules for 2017. They've referenced these technical standard and specifications as the minimum required standards for the MiniGrids in the country. Another component is the support of financial institutions to help them identify, analyze, and finance MiniGrids projects. Another component is the development of information portal for permitting and licensing. I'll explain that more in detail because that's the main tool I would like to share with you and to show you today how we have developed and how to use it. But another major component, apart from market development, is support to developer. This is all about transaction advisory services. It's this addresses the market barrier to mobilize resources and investments. So to help MiniGrid projects, to help investors to officially commercialize and scale up MiniGrids in Tanzania. The support involves technical assessment of design, capacity building, and financial, legal, as well as compliance and access, registration permits and licenses, and so forth. So allow me to quickly take you to the MiniGrid portal, which is the tool for permitting and licensing. That's the whole purpose we developed this MiniGrid information portal. So anybody who is interested to invest or to develop MiniGrids in Tanzania can go to this site, which is www.minigrids.go.tz, and be able to see all the requirements. So if you'll allow me, I'll remove this main screen right now and launch the Internet Explorer, which was already prepared, so that I may try to show you live how it works. Can you see it well right there, Stefan?
We can still see your presentation currently, Andrew.
Okay.
And now we can see the Internet Explorer.
Okay, now you can see the portal.
Yeah, we can see the web page now.
Okay, thank you so much. So when you type on your browser minigrids.go.tz, the home page will appear like what you see right now on your screen. Then when you scroll down, you'll find the list at the bottom of the agencies, which we call them the working group, comprising all these representatives who are part and parcel of developing this MiniGrid portal, but also they're part and parcel of the entire implementation of MiniGrid program in Tanzania in partnership with IFC. And at the page, when you click licensing section, you'll receive the screen which you might see in few seconds right in front of you. This screen gives you the options to enter the capacity of your MiniGrid, if it's below 1 megawatt, or it's between 1 and 10 megawatt, or there's no generation, it's just distribution. And the moment you make these selections, automatically it gives you the procedure in chronological order what you are required to do in the country. So you can select the capacity, then you can select the technology, you can select whether it's a hybrid or not, and then you can select wholesale selling to DNO. This is the distributed network operator. And you can select if it's not a DNO, if you are selling directly electricity to the community that are surrounding you. And you can opt to do both, that you have your own customers in your own grid, and at the same time you are selling to the DNO. And by doing that, the selection you make there, when you scroll down, automatically you get in chronological order all the procedures and requirements you need in the country. For example, you'll see the generation license, then you'll see distribution license, then you'll see the supply license depending on the selection you did at the top. For example, if I select no generation, automatically everything will change. All you'll need is a distribution license and supply license if you are just building a distribution network. But the moment you choose that you will also generate, you need a generation license. And from the generation license, then you can click anything numbered there to get more details. For example, if you click environmental clearance, it will open like that, and you can see the details of what is required and the procedures, the registration of the project with NEMC, submission of terms of reference, carrying out the EIA study, submission of the environmental impact statement to NEMC. And each of these, the moment you click it, you get more details and key facts, and as well as some of the context. For example, scoping report, what contact is you're expected to submit. For example, registration with NEMC, you can get the template form right there. You can get the forms and all the details in place. This is on the licensing section. You can scroll down and all the details, you can see them there. If you click on under financing, which is the next tab, currently what we have loaded here is the procedure if you want to access funding, which is under the Rural Energy Agency. Currently, it will be the TRIP funding, which is provided by the World Bank. So the TRIP funding also will be, the details will be uploaded soon because it has been recently approved and recently shared by the public. Actually, it was last week. The details were shared last week. So in a week or so, all the details about financing on how to access funding on TRIP program, which is $43 million for entire off-grid. but almost $20 million for the mini-grids. All the information will be under this section. When you click the library section, you can get all documents in terms of law, policy, reports, forms and fees, tariffs and financing. And once you click in any of these listed documents, you get the summary of the document, and you can straight go on and download the specific document. So we have tried to upload all the key laws, policy, reports, forms and fees, tariffs, guidelines and standards. All these documents are here. You can just click it and get the download. And soon we're waiting next week to get the approval from EWURA, the new released SPP rules of 2017, which were approved by the EWURA board on 29th of June. I think by next week also they will be online, so people can easily access them. So this was the main purpose of forming this portal for licensing and permits, policy, regulations, and information. And on the long run, we came to get more information from the Rural Energy Agency and decided to put the GIS section, which allow me to go straight to one of the sites, which I opened earlier to allow so that I may save time to instead of loading the entire site. So the GIS section, you can pick the region you want and the village, the district, and after picking the district, for example, here I picked Lindi region, and then you pick Nachingwea, for example, just an example. And the moment you click whether you want to see if the village is electrified or not, automatically you'll get the list of villages which are electrified under that district. If you click to be electrified via grid, you can get all the villages which will be electrified according to REA plan. But also you can click and see villages which has been set aside by REA that will be only electrified by off-grid technology. And for example, if you click, I'm removing other villages to leave those which have been set aside for off-grid. If you click the pin there, automatically you'll get the details about that region, the village, and the population of that village. So this is very brief. Let me take you. There are other options here which you can tick. For example, the existing mini hydros, the potential hydros, and the number 4 there under MV lines. If you tick the 33 kV lines, 11 kV lines, these are currently existing lines under the main grid. So if you click that, your map will appear like what you see right now. All that blue is what exists right now, the current grid extension in terms of 33 and 11 kV lines. If you click the next one, which is the proposed next REA plans for the next 5 years, this is the ambitious plan of the government. Of course, now they are going to break it into number of loads, into number of phases. Of course, this might take longer than the ambitious 5-year plan. And the next screen, I tried to combine all of them so that you may see where the plans are and where the grid is going. But also the same page also have the Global Solar Atlas for Tanzania, which gives you all these details. I believe you can see, I did not click that section specifically so that to save time. But the moment you click that link, you'll be taken to the Global Solar Atlas. And you can see the photovoltaic electricity output. That's what you see right now. But there are a number of options on your right-hand side corner. And you can download the maps on any area that you need. But also, if we go back on the main page here, there's this section which we call it transaction advisory facility site. This is the site where we work with developers that they can register and ask for specific advisory that they need. And there are several services offered under this transaction advisory facility, including technical and engineering support, business advisory, capital raising, legal and compliance advice, training and workshop. So we started to work on this transaction advisory end of last year, but the entire MiniGrid program started in October 2015, and we'll continue to work with MiniGrid developers under transaction advisory facility, and we'll continue to update the MiniGrid portal, as well as continue to do several studies on market intelligence studies, such as benchmarking, and as well as to engage this, I call them the regulatory bodies, the NEMKI, the AWURA, to continue to support them in terms of review of regulatory and to review regulatory issues, policy and laws and regulations, but also to support them to draft other key components which are key for the development of the sector. For example, recently we supported NEMKI to develop solar checklist, which is expected in the long run to simplify the entire EIA process. And we are going to engage with them to also develop other tools for small hydro, for wind, similar like the one we've developed for solar checklist technology. Having said that, let me say thank you for now. I believe if there will be any other questions, you can ask, and I can try to respond. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. Now I'd like to introduce Sanjoy to the presentation. Sanjoy, we can see your screen. Oh,
can you see? Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely. It looks great.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for inviting us to this webinar. We're very happy to present our mapping tool, which should work complementary to some of the resources that Andrew had for practitioners in particular, to help decide where you want to focus, particular region that you want to focus in. Okay, so our purpose is to create a visualization tool for exploring energy access in Tanzania, what this means is to understand where the off-grid market opportunities are, which region or district that you need to focus on. The way we do this is to really use publicly available data, and that our main source is the source of the census 2012, which gives us an indication of socioeconomic characteristics of the various regions and districts, and supplemented with the RIA report of 2016, which many of you would be familiar with. So but those who are not, let me just add one sentence. What this report did is it samples a number of households across the country to understand the extent to which Tanzania has made progress towards its electrification goals. And those results are very interesting, and some of our maps really focus on getting into the details of what the data means for both practitioners and policymakers. The other data set that we have is, of course, in energy infrastructure location, somewhat similar to what Andrew showed you in terms of transmission lines, but we focus a lot on existing mini-grids. What I would do is to take you through a few slides which have the screenshots of the actual maps, and then I'll flip over to demonstrating the maps to you. And then, of course, you would have the access to both the PowerPoint and the map link to play around. The first one is around the existing mini-grids. Now, as many of you know, Tanzania, one of the interesting things of Tanzania is that you actually have more than 100 mini-grids operating in this country. Many of them, hydro mini-grids, and you will see them in the blue-colored section at the bottom of the screen, which is where the the waterfalls exist, and then solar mini-grids, which are in the middle of the screen. And then you have, of course, biomass mini-grids and hybrid mini-grids. Some of the larger mini-grids are actually hybrid mini-grids. Of these 100 mini-grids, there are about maybe 15% of that is actually directly connected to the TANESCO grid, but the rest sort of supply to isolated communities. In our actual map, one of the things you could do, and I'll demonstrate this to you, is that you could click on a mini-grid and understand a little bit of where it is located, what its capacity is, and of course it's generating technology, which is solar or wind or hydro, but that you can also make out from the color. The interesting thing about the 2016 update, and we do have some hopefully interesting maps that will help people to understand this, is the progress the country has made on electrification. However, in this particular slide, what I'm going to show you is the fact that large parts of the rural country are still not electrified. So, for example, the darkest regions that you see on the border on the left-hand side of the map is actually more than 80% of rural households which are not electrified. But of course, in areas which are which are more touristy and commercial, Arusha, for example, or Nogombe towards south, those areas, the rural electrification rates are much higher, but still even today about 50%. The interesting thing is that where the electrification has progressed from 2012 to 2016, and this is obviously very important for practitioners, of course policymakers too, but practitioners particularly, because as you know, one of the things that as mini-grid developers, for example, we are concerned about is we do not want to locate a mini-grid where the grid arrives very quickly. So we have a map which kind of sort of divides the country into 4 regions where depending on where the grid is expanded. And of course, as you could see from the screen, you could click on a region and get some statistics around the population density or the number of people who do not have access in 2016 versus 2012. Remember, of course, that 2016 was a sample data. One important thing that I would like to point out in the 2016 update is the fact that this extent of electrification, which we saw in the previous map, has actually been contributed significantly by solar penetration. Now, the methodology, or at least the publicly available report, does not distinguish between solar mini-grids and solar home systems, but I think it will be very safe to assume that most of this of the solar is actually solar home systems, in particular, perhaps even the pay-as-you-go systems that have been expanding in the country. Now, the startling statistics is the following, which is at the bottom of this slide. If a rural household has access to modern electricity, then 0.65 of those households have access to modern electricity via solar. and 35% via the TANESCO grid. This, of course, flips when you look at the urban area. I just want to repeat this because this is, I think, a very key takeaway from the 2016 update, that the progress of electrification in Tanzania has been significantly because of solar and most likely solar home systems. Now, as MiniGrid developers, you'd have to, this has implications for you. One of the implications is the next slide, which is that when households were asked, do you get your electricity from kerosene or solar or grid? One important fact is that the country which was predominantly kerosene, at least the rural population, predominantly kerosene in 2012, has shifted significantly away from kerosene in 2016. And then you will see the main areas, Lindi, Tabora, Kigoma, where the movement from kerosene has happened. Now, again, I think this is important because as MiniGrid, as generally off-grid developers, the tendency has been to market our product and service versus use of versus how much households spend on kerosene. Now that probably will have to be rethought a little bit as consumer behavior seems to be changing. People seem to be, if you're not getting electricity from solar or the grid, the tendency seems to be from the data to get it from rechargeable lights, which is probably batteries. As I said, one of the things that we have tried to look at the map, look at in our map, is on economic buoyancy, which is, in many of these areas, obviously we know that, these areas are poor and remote, but there is, higher areas of economic buoyancy and less areas of economic buoyancy. And the thinking behind behind this process of developing the maps has been that private developers should channel their resources in areas which have high economic buoyancy, and of course, public funds should go to areas which have relatively lower economic buoyancy, because that's where maximum impact for both types of finance will be felt. What we have done is using the census data of 3 asset classes, which is iron sheet roofing, radio, and livestock, combined them, but not necessarily in this, with equal weights. For example, livestock in our model has a lower weight. To divide the country in this map that you see around economic buoyancy. And as you can see, Arusha, for example, pops up as one of the areas that has greater economic buoyancy. It's also an area where, as some of the larger solar home system companies started operations from, which is intuitively the right place to start. In our actual maps, and I will move over to that in a minute, you can actually spend time in drilling down, looking at the particular data sets that you are interested in, looking at districts, and looking at where where public finance should be focused in, where private finance can go. But let me do that using the maps. Can you see my maps now?
Yes, we're able to see them.
Fantastic. So this first map is really a map of the country in terms of its population density, which is of course an important area, and you may want to. I'll skip. Obviously there is a lot of interesting stuff in the maps, but some of the things that I talked about. Each of these maps will have to be loaded on their own, so it'll take a few seconds. But for example, now can you see the overall state of electrification in Tanzania? Can you all see the map?
Sanjoy, yes, we can see it. It looks great.
Fantastic. And then you can click on, and I'm moving my cursor around that. You can click here for rural electrification rates, which is the map I showed you on my PowerPoint. You can click on, the percentage of people using solar. You can click on the percentage of people using grid in each region. I'm not going to show you those maps because, as I said, each of those maps will have to be loaded. But you saw screenshots of those maps in my PowerPoint. What you'll see next is where the mini grids are located. Let us wait for it to come up in a second. And you should have seen this map in the PowerPoint. But for example, now if you click on any of these mini grids, you can look at, for example, this particular one is connected to the grid. It's the hydro mini grid. It's in the region of Nagombe, and even the village is mentioned. Can you see that?
Yes, we're able to see it.
Fantastic. I will skip over, for example, the details of the electrification gains 2012, 2016, and I would encourage you to sort of play around with it at various points when you have it, because those are things that I discussed. One of the cool things that I wanted to show you is around the economic buoyancy. As I said, we have used different weights, so iron sheet roofing and livestock ownership. Livestock ownership has a lower weight, but you could, for example, look at, and I think this is really an interesting feature which I wanted to end this presentation with. For example, you could say, I am private sector player. I want to focus my business in one particular, using a set of criteria. And so you click on regions, and you click on private sector, and you have a lot of explanation of where on the right. But basically, what you do is that you click on this filter. And you say, I want to click on, I want to focus on, focus on areas which have higher energy need. So the first two regions where the maximum number of people are not connected to the grid. But I think in my business, I sell a radio with my system, and I think my consumers really like to listen to radio. So I click on only radio, people who have high radio ownership. And you would get those regions that fit your specific criteria. What is even more interesting is that you could, for example, do this at the district level. So if I click on district filter, private sector, I would get a similar map. Let us wait for it to come up. And I say, this is the country, this is the district. And I said, okay, I'm starting up my business. I have money to set up 5 mini grids or whatever it is. But I want to focus it in an area where there is potential to expand in neighboring villages. And I say, I want to pick districts which have high energy need, but only radio, because I think my audience really wants to listen to radio. And then you get specific districts that you can focus on, and within that you can choose perhaps contiguous districts to start your business. So this is our tool. And with that, I say thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sanjoy. Now we'd like to welcome Alexander Ox to the webinar. Wonderful. Alex, we can see your screen.
All right, and you should be able to hear me now as well?
Yes, loud and clear. Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks much, Yasmin, and thanks to Andrew and Sanjay for great presentations of the really fantastic work. Really want to congratulate for your contributions. Great to see. I only have a few minutes, so let's get started right away. I've been asked to introduce to you a new initiative which we are organizing as part of the Let's GP, the Low Emissions Development Strategies Global Partnership. And this initiative is called African MiniGrids Community of Practice. I am the chair of the Energy Working Group of the Let's Global Partnership, who has designed this initiative in close cooperation with the Africa platform of the Let's GP. So for those of you who do not know what the Let's GP is, try and change my slides. Here we go. This is a quick overview. The Let's GP is a practitioners network of now more than 500 governments and international organizations. More than 2,000 individuals have contributed to it in one or the other way. The mission of the Let's GP really is to harness the collective knowledge and resources of governments, donors, international organizations, and individuals for scaling up and implementing climate resilient, low emissions development strategies. Around the world, pretty much, the center of gravity of the Let's Global Partnership is in its regional platforms, which you see on the left-hand screen. Until recently, we had 3 of them: Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. And more recently, we have a new platform that has founded itself, so to speak, which is the EP platform for Europe and Eurasia. The groups like mine, the sectoral groups, but also groups on financing and tools for analysis and subnational integration, have the main role of supporting really what the regional platforms are doing, but we're also at points are creating our own global, more global initiatives. So that's what the Let's GP is. I wanted to introduce on the next 2 slides briefly what a community of practice is, or how we have designed and implemented communities of practice. The term, of course, is not our invention, but I think the specific design is quite special of how we're implementing it under the Let's Global Partnership. So what is a community of practice? It's really a new approach to providing technical assistance to countries that are asking for support, and in our case, in the energy sector. So a couple of years ago, I was thinking about what we can do to be really more serious about making the provision of technical assistance more demand-driven, less top-down, less based on writing studies in Washington DC or in Berlin or Wales and another capital of the world, and presenting them then in the field and shaking hands with ministers and leaving the country again. So this is a long-term effort, a community of practice. We came up with this tool and have started to implement it last year in Latin America and the Caribbean with a community of practice that is focusing specifically on bioelectricity. and now it has become really the center of our work in the energy working group. Most of our time really goes towards working with the regional platforms on these communities of practice. How do we do this? We invite governments to join a community of like-minded countries that are all sharing certain goals, that are all ambitious in creating an energy system that is affordable and reliable and sustainable, and to come together to work on a very specific issue area. In fact, the requests for these issue areas themselves come out of the requests of countries at regional platform meetings, or in the case of Africa and the MiniGrid's community of practice, even came out of a survey of the members of the Africa platform. And our role then really is to support the countries in designing a joint work program of topics that are of mutual interest, and help them move forward towards its implementation. So our role is really that of rather that of a co-pilot, and we're taking this very serious. So to give you just one example, at our personal meetings and at our virtual meetings, we're starting with the governments presenting their situation, presenting their key challenges, presenting what ideas they have on making progress, and only then we're bringing trainers in and experts in to support them to achieve that. So it's quite a special and very time intense and resource intense initiative, not just for us as organizers and supporters, but also for the countries. It's not a one-time gig, so to speak, where you present what your country is or wants to do, but it is a continuous effort, and it requires significant time resources. So I'm going to flip through these slides very quickly because I know I have very little time, but what is important for members is that they share a joint goal, comparable demands, that they are willing to help and share their insights and their best and worst practices, and at the same time, of course, they are open to be assisted, that they are honest about their challenges. So our meetings are off the record, and countries are asked to really specifically focus on where the problems and the challenges and the deficiencies lie, so that we can attack and can address and tackle those. And for us as organizers, it's important that we create this trust environment, that we employ multiple communication channels as we have done, that we're creating a conceptual framework that provides some guidance and sort of some concept in moving forward, but is very flexible to address the demands. And we then can support countries with our own research and drafting capacities. We bring in trainers like the Clean Energy Solution Centers, experts on the very specific and technical issues. All right, this is and apologies for not having the nice visuals that my predecessors had, and presenting so text-driven slides here. But this is just very quickly for sort of how the MiniGrid's community of practice in Africa.
Alexander?
Yes?
So very sorry to interrupt. We just need to shortly move on to the question and answer session.
Okay, do I have a couple of minutes?
Another minute or two, if you could wrap it up. We really need to move on. Okay, so I'm going to just flip to my last bullet here. Our goal is really not education in any way, but it is creation of policies, regulations, and programs. So this is the time schedule. We're just coming out of an inaugural workshop in Benin, and this is now becoming a one-year process with 2 more in-person meetings and a number of work streams that we're going to create under this community of practice. So these are the broad priority and work areas. No worries, these are my last 2 slides, and I'm not going to go through them in detail, but basically we conceptualized what it is that the 11 members of the community of practice from all across Africa, Tanzania being one of them, and showing great leadership in it, have defined, and we're very much aware of all the other good initiatives that are out there, including the host of this session.
So basically what we're coming out with from the last meeting is a keen interest to work on business models, to work on access to donors and international financing, and that's basically where we are continuing to go in the future. The next workshop in 3 months is going to be specifically focused on access to financing and business models, what has been working across Africa in the area of mini-grids. And I'm looking forward to bringing as many of you into this as are interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And thank you to each of the panelists for those outstanding presentations. As we shift to the Q&A, I would just like to remind our attendees to please submit the questions using the question pane at any time. We also keep up several links up on the screen throughout for quick reference that point you to where you can find information about upcoming previously held webinars and how to take advantage of the AskanExpert program. With that, we'd like to go to our moderated discussion with Yasmin. Yasmin?
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone. This was a really great series of presentations of very complementary resources, one on the how with all the documents that IFC has put together, one on the where with all the maps that that WRI is showcasing, and also one on the who with the community of practices. I'm just going to take maybe about 10 or so minutes to ask some overarching and broader questions that hopefully will also answer some of our audience questions. In the meantime, we welcome all of you to ask your questions, whether they're specific to each presenter or overall, through the question pane. And I just want to remind everybody that we're also live tweeting the webinar through #PNWebinar, so you can also ask questions or join the conversation through there. So I wanted to start with a question on well, sort of a remark on the fact that while there are many energy access related mapping efforts, the two that we've seen today are obviously very unique contributions. So I want to give Sanjoy and Andrew a chance to talk about how each tool complements other tools in the space, what makes them different, what is their value add for different stakeholders, and if there's opportunity in the future, so what other data layers would you want to add on and that people can look forward to seeing? Sanjoy, maybe we can start with you.
Thank you. From our perspective, we try to focus on demand, where the demand is, which is why we're looking at socioeconomic characteristics and characteristics in particular. And we believe that this complements well with, for example, the supply side, and the solar atlas is one example of that, and then looking at specific villages within an overall region.
Great, Andrew, did you want to chime in?
Thank you so much. Actually,
Andrew, we can't really hear you. Please make sure you're talking into your microphone.
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear
No, I'm sorry, Andrew. It's still really faint. Can you adjust your microphone?
Okay, now?
It's a little bit better. It's still very faint, though.
Strange. Let me speak louder. Okay, so briefly, what we are doing basically is the entire approach of looking on the mini-grid space. And the first 2 years were much more on the market development. Now the next 3 years, as we have just started the second phase, we're going also to look into details to develop more tools that will be used. For example, now we are gathering some information how to do the entire household mapping on the remote areas, but also at the same time to do some demand and supply market intelligence studies, and which will involve different stakeholders, but also on the other side to look on how we can support the hybrid systems which exist outside there. So it's the entire package. While we continue to work with the transaction advisory facility, we continue to work with mini-grid developers to assist them to develop financial business models. So it's the entire approach of looking the studies, the tools, but also to support developers to successfully implement MiniGrid project commercially viable and to scale up. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you both. One other question that I have already received via email from a lot of our members even before the webinar was the question of whether you have any other countries in mind for this kind of mapping, whether there's a possibility for expansion of either tool or any other countries you're considering doing similar projects for. And again, this goes for both Sandra and Andrew. Feel free to answer in any order you like.
Andrew, do you want to go first, or?
Okay. Yes. In the future, there is a possibility of going to other countries also. The more details will be coming soon. But yes, in the future, more tools will be developed to other countries also, which we are looking at.
Yeah, thank you. We have one version of these maps already developed for India. The Tanzania maps are, of course, further along and developed. And again, our plan, like Andrew's, is to go to other countries, in particular to other countries in East Africa.
Great. Another thing I had in mind is sort of the question that we always ask all of our panelists on especially country-related webinars, which is the question of coordination in the policy environment. Obviously, we've seen that Tanzania has basically the highest number of mini-grid operators in sub-Saharan Africa, and yet still barriers exist. So if you could maybe all three of you speak to your thoughts around mini-grid regulation and implementation, what the government might be planning, how to coordinate around that, how to also ensure sustainability as well as commercial viability, because from Andrew's presentation, we saw that mini-grids were considered commercially viable only for the high-density populations, which you can argue might also be great candidates for grid extension. So how do we manage that tension, and what other barriers might we have to consider, or what other solutions might there be in terms of ensuring that there is a proper scale up, specifically of mini-grids, but we can also obviously talk about other distributed energy solutions. Andrew, can we start with you, since you have a great historic overview of Tanzania?
Thank you very much, Yasmin. Well, for the context of Tanzania, recently the government has put some effort, of course, with support from other development partners.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you speak a little higher and maybe a little slower? I feel like we're losing some of what you're saying.
Okay. I'm saying that much better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what I was saying is in Tanzania context, the government have recently been working to improve the regulatory sector. And I'm saying this because, for example, last year we've been working with the regulator, this is the WURA, to support them and to work with other stakeholders on the process of reviewing the rules. And now, last month on 29th of June, the body approved the new SPP rules of 2017. These rules have something which is very key under Section 7 of the rules, which will be public soon. It speaks about the compensation framework, and that addresses those challenges which we said that more densely populated areas, they are more viable for commercial projects, but also at the same time attractive to the grid extension. But at the same time, there are some of these places are very far from the main grid, and it is currently very expensive to the government to connect them. Maybe they might be connected in 5 or 10 years to come. But the question is currently what is the best solution? So we look at it as
Andrew, we're unfortunately losing you again.
Yeah, Andrew, go ahead, Yasmin, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just wanted to say, Andrew, we seem to be losing you from time to time. So if you could wrap up your comments, hopefully your line will clear up once we get back to you.
Okay, what I was saying is basically the new regulatory frameworks which are in place right now, they are very good and addressing that challenge what happened, the grid comes, and the entire issue about compensation framework and the whole discussion about how do you connect and sell to the main grid if the main grid comes. So still you have the room to operate on the off-grid, but at the same time, if the main grid comes, you have that option to negotiate with the main off-taker. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Sanjay, did you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. I think, Andrew has made the key important points about technical standards and interconnectivity of the grid. I would like to just step back and since you asked the question about coordination, just step back and point out two I think overarching approaches which we encourage. One is an approach about understanding that resources are finite and to effectively utilize public finances, to use parameters like population density, socioeconomic considerations, and use public finance where it is most needed and where private sector is, would not go in as the first choice, and then encourage private sector to go in where where there's already tourism potential, where where socioeconomic considerations exist. So I believe an overarching issue of allocating resources is what we would encourage. The second point, and I think Alexander brought this out, is around business models of mini-grids. And here, obviously, we know that the mini-grids economics are still very much question mark. So it's important for us to augment the economic return with the impact return. What is the socioeconomic impact that mini-grids create, and be able to filter that in the decision making of allocating capital.
Great, thank you, Sanjoy. Alex, did you want to chime in as well?
Well, maybe just briefly. So from what we've been able to see so far, there are many different ideas about how to make a business out of this out there. Many different business models. They differ, let's see, in their general orientation, in their setup, in the way they are financed, what the expectations are for rate of revenue, and so on and so forth. So some of them are entirely privately set up, entirely privately financed. Some are grant supported. Some are PPPs. It's really there's a wide range of ideas out there. Not all of them work. I mean, Sanjay was just speaking about the difficulty of making them attractive to financiers in certain settings, and that's a big problem, of course. Clearly, there's many ways that the investment environment can be improved through the work that has been just presented by Andrew and Sanjay, which I believe is really an enormous contribution, but also through shortening the very costly and lengthy, and in many countries very intransparent permitting processes. We heard from Andrew about the importance of technical standards and quality standards. There's really a lot that countries can do, and I think we'll likely all agree that we're at the very beginning of learning how to create such an attractive investment environment, and what business models can then work.
Great, thank you all. I'm aware of the time, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for the audience Q&A. So just to wrap up this portion very quickly, if all three of you could give one or two recommendations that you might have for people looking to enter the Tanzanian market, obviously focusing on mini-grids again, but if you do have any suggestions on the distributed energy side as well. And Andrew, maybe we can start with you again.
Andrew, I believe your mic might be on mute.
Oh, sorry for that. So very quickly, I would like to say that it is key to understand the regulation and framework of the specific country, and it's key also to understand the entire business model. What kind of business model are you trying to develop and invest in? Is it 100% off grid? Is it 100% connected to the main grid? Or 100% or 50-50 kind of connected to the main grid, connected to the communities off grid, and also even if it's the off grid, what kind of model do you really want in terms of the connection to the households? Because there are different models that people are piloting in the country, and all of them, they have different challenges. As what Alexander said, that we are still on that learning process and see which one is real viable and which one is not. But key issues, the regulations, another one is access to information and the entire business model on how it can work and which one works better. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Sanjoy, did you have anything to add?
So from my point of view, and echoing the words of some of the entrepreneurs we have worked with, assuming, Yasmin, that your question is about private businesses entering Tanzania, our recommendation is really very simple, which is be very strategic about choosing where to start your business in. You know, you do have to engage, you do have to market, and and you have to go through that process which every technology company needs to go through, which is, you know, go through early adopter markets and then reach mainstream. It is therefore very important to focus your resources. So pick regions using very well thought out criteria.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Alex, did you have anything to add before we move on to the audience Q&A?
Maybe two quick things. One is, I think, for all of us, basically a challenge or a task, which is, I think we need to do a much better job in building the joints between local communities, not just the governments within countries like Tanzania. Tanzania is already a great leader on this, and many other countries in Africa are far behind. And they're just starting to look into the issue and starting to understand it. And so building a joint between them and then the financing mechanisms that are out there. Private sector, I think we'll likely all agree, has to play really a major role in this. But in many cases, the market just isn't there for just the private sector involvement. There is a strong role for international organizations to play, for bilateral support, for really creative models for equity-based versus debt-based financing. And so building these joints between the international community and local governments is a one key area, I think, where we have to do a lot better job. There's a lot of talk about all these billions being, you know, sitting there on the sidelines waiting to be invested, and it's not happening, and we need to figure out why that is. That's the one thing. The second one is, I think we need to, you know, as we get to really the local ground, we need to really work much more closely with the local communities and discuss with them what it is that they need electricity for. I think we're often simplifying this topic a lot. You know, for example, through thinking of access to light, which is a very important thing, but which can be done through standalone systems, maybe sometimes better than through mini-grids. Mini-grids have different functions to play, and I think it's local communities who have to bring forward what it is that they really need these specific technical applications for, and based on that input, it's important to build the support mechanisms.
Great. Once again, thank you, Andrew, Sanjoy, and Alex for being with us today and for these both great presentations and also great insights. I'm going to turn it over to Katie and Stephanie. Hopefully we have a little bit of time at least for the audience Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin, for that wonderful discussion. And we do have some time for the questions. We've had some wonderful audience questions. I will begin with Andrew. Andrew, there was a question on how often is the MiniGrid data updated to keep up with changing regulations? And are these tools available freely to the public?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, that's a very good question in terms of updating the portal. And we are working with REA and WURA on that. And we expect once these key documents, for example, the recently released document from NEMKI and WURA, which are very key for the mini-grid sector, about 4 of them, including the net metering as well as the SPPA and the solar checklist. Once they are ready, we'll start updating them as soon as they officially make them public. So the idea is to have all these agencies themselves updated, and if possible, also IFC will keep on updating and supporting the government agents to update for the next 2-3 years. And these tools are available, and you can download all those documents. You can access this web portal, and all the details will be shared at the portal, and people can easily access them.
Wonderful, thank you, Andrew. Sanjoy, same question. Do you want to talk about the tools and how often they're updated for you?
Yes, the tools are public, open source. Though, as it was mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, this is one of the early times it is being exposed. In terms of updating, at this point of time, the data sources that we have used has largely been census data 2016 update of the RIA, which have not challenged us to update on a real-time source. Our idea is to open this up to practitioners, including integrate with other tools. So, and when we do that, we would go very much in the same way, I think, as Andrew mentioned, which is to have stakeholders, which is to empower stakeholders to be able to update data on this platform, seamlessly, from their own data sources.
Thank you, Sanjoy. For all the panelists, what are your requirements from the private sector, and what types of partnerships do you prefer?
Please, can you come again on that question?
Sorry, we'll move to the next one. Sanjoy, what is the process to establish the baseline for the kerosene consumption map?
The kerosene consumption map baseline was the 2012 census data, which is the universe of all households in Tanzania who were polled as to where they get their electricity from. And the questions and the options they had at that point in time to choose was kerosene, candles, or the grid, or other sources. At that point of time in 2012, there was an overwhelmingly large number which was kerosene, and we do see a trend change on that in 2016.
Wonderful, thank you, Sanjoy. For all the panelists, what's the timeline for the regulatory framework to enable the mini-grid to sell to the main grid when it comes to Tanzania?
Thank you so much for that question. And it all depends on the most of this mainly depends on the regulator. That's the WURA, because you need to have discussions with the WURA and TANESCO. In this case, TANESCO is the main off-taker connecting to the main grid. So there must be a letter of intent and the discussion with TANESCO first. Once TANESCO shows interest and are willing to connect to the main grid, then you can discuss that with a WURA so that the entire SPPA document can be drafted and you guys to reach into agreement that you're going to connect and sell power to TANESCO under XY regulated tariffs. Now, the question is the matter of how long will it take for the negotiations between you and TANESCO that can be unpredictable because depending on the key issues on the table on both sides. As you know, the main utility TANESCO is a public utility. So sometimes you might say, okay, they agree with you in 2 months to discuss 3 months, and within that time something come up with the government which is high priority for them, and then they push you to maybe in 1 month later or 2 months later to have a kind of negotiation. But usually it should not take more than 6 months to have kind of this agreement if everything is in good place and in order, and all the documents are in place, and the off-taker have shown interest to buy power from you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Our next question is, what happens if 2 different foreign companies happen to choose the same location? Sanjay or Andrew, do you want to address that?
Okay, let me try to address that. Before you operate, for example, you pick a place and you identify a location and say you want to develop your mini-grid or microgrid. The first stage which you're supposed to do is to contact Ewura for them to give you a provisional license. And during that process of you getting a provisional license, if it is above 1 megawatt, if it is below 1 megawatt, all you need currently is just registration. So during that process of registration or getting a provisional license, Ewura will be able to tell you that this location you identify already have been applied by XYZ. So by going to Ewura as early as possible before you do any other cost or resource investment or so whatsoever, meeting with the regulator is very key, because from Ewura they can tell you this project is registered by XYZ, so you don't have you cannot pick the same location, or there's somebody else with a provisional license of that exact location. You cannot pick the same location. So meeting with Ewura as early as possible once you know XYZ is the perfect location for you is very key. And the next agency to meet with is REA, because also REA, they support these developers. Once they identify places, they need visibility studies also for they register with REA. But at the end of the day, each of them must be registered or have provisional license with Ewura. So it's key to visit these agencies before you put a lot of resources on the area which you have identified.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for all the panelists for that informative question and answer session. We had tons of questions from the audience. For the ones we didn't have time to get to, we will connect with those attendees offline after the webinar. On behalf of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, I'd like to extend a thank you to all of our expert panelists and to our attendees for participating in today's webinar. We very much appreciate your time and hope in return there are some valuable insights that you can take back to your ministries, departments, or organizations. We also invite you to inform your colleagues and those in your networks about the Solution Center resources and services, including no-cost policy support through our Ask an Expert service. I invite you to check the Solution Center website if you'd like to view the slides and listen to the recording of today's presentation, as well as previously held webinars. Additionally, you'll find information on upcoming webinars and other training events. We are also now posting the webinar recordings to the Clean Energy Solutions Center YouTube channel. Please allow about a week for the audio recording to be posted. And finally, I would like to kindly ask you to take a moment to complete the short survey that will appear at the end when we conclude the webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at future Clean Energy Solution Center events. And this concludes our webinar.